How do we face the fears that we have in our lives? Fear comes in many forms: fright, panic, terror, anxiety, worrying, running or hiding, or not willing to go out because you are afraid to do things in your life. You stay and you escape, you avoid anything out there. Fear can also come in the form of timidity, not being able to speak out when you need to speak out. Fear can also come when you're too reserved, similar to being timid. Fear can also come in the form of being too cautious or being too conservative, and you're afraid to go beyond your comfort zone. But fear can also be something positive. That's something that we probably experience when we related to our parents out of respect and reverence, because we recognize their authority in our life. That can also be a form of fear, but fear in a good way, expressed as respect and reverence. Now, in these examples that I gave of fear, it is clear that it's a mixture of something positive and something normal. And fear, like many of the emotions that we've already talked about, is something very natural. But the problem with fear, it can also turn into something negative that's connected to the previous talk that we had, which is fear can cause people to express anger in a wrong way. Fear that modern people experience today is less physical. I mean, because of the modern advances, I think more and more, less and less people experience famine, although famine still exists in the world. But we are not afraid of getting hungry in our world today. There seems to be a lot of poverty, but still more and more people are not afraid of the physical things. But there is a trend today that people are afraid of things involving society and involving relating with others. These social fears are often an effect of media. A lot of people, when they look at the billboards and see the beautiful people, you end up having this pressure of experiencing that if you're not beautiful, you're not okay. So this fear that enters into the life of people can prevent us often to lead. These fears can often lead us to experience lack of peace of mind and heart. Now, fear, like many emotions that we've studied, is a natural human reaction to danger. I mean, if we did not have fear, we could cross the street without any worry, and if we did not have fear, we might not be cautious enough to watch out if we would get hit by a car. So fear is something good in the sense that it allows us to be conscious of the danger around us. Fear can come in the form of a human reaction, a feeling inside, or it could also be expressed in behavior, like the example that I gave you a while ago of people who are so timid and so afraid that they could stay in their house and say, I am afraid to go out and do my job. People experience that these days. And it's an example of fear and how it's expressed by human beings. What's our Christian approach to this human experience of fear, or this emotion of fear? What's the Christian approach? Let's look at what Scripture has to say about this. First, the Scripture exhorts us not to be fearful. Let me give you an example in this passage from the letter of Paul to the Romans. Romans 8, 14 to 17. For all who are led by the Spirit of God are sons of God. For you did not receive a spirit of slavery to fall back into fear, but you have received the spirit of sonship. When we cry, Abba, Father, it is the Spirit Himself bearing witness with our spirit that we are children of God. And if children, then heirs, heirs of God, and fellow heirs with Christ, provided we suffer with Him in order that we may also be glorified with Him. In this passage, St. Paul is warning us not to fall back into fear. And he tells us not to fall back into fear because we are children of God. That assurance that God will always be with us. And he even describes that it's the Spirit of God inside of us reminding us of our relationship with God. And because we have this relationship with God, why should we be afraid? We should not be afraid, St. Paul says. But yet, in the Bible, we also see examples of people who were afraid. One great example is Jesus Himself in the agony in the garden. As He was facing the prospect of offering His life on the cross, it was very clear that in the Gospels, He is shown to be a human being afraid of what He was about to face. And yet, in spite of the fear, what did He say? Not my will, but yours be done. But He did experience fear. So in the scriptures, we are often exhorted to be afraid of the right things. So in scriptures, we are often exhorted to fear the right things and not the wrong things. First, we are exhorted to fear the Lord. In the same way that I said that we often fear our parents out of respect and reverence for them, we, in the same way, are called in the scriptures to fear the Lord. Hebrews 12, 27 to 28. This phrase, yet once more, indicates the removal of what is shaken as of what has been made, in order that what cannot be shaken may remain. Therefore, let us be grateful for receiving a kingdom that cannot be shaken. And thus let us offer to God acceptable worship with reverence and awe. The author of this scripture from the letter to the Hebrews is describing how we should hold on to the things of God. That at some point in time, the Lord will take away things that are not supposed to be there. And yet it ends by telling us that we need, bottom line, to be afraid of God in the sense of respect and reverence for losing relationship with God. We are supposed to be afraid of losing that relationship. That's why when we worship, we are intending to declare to God, God, if you are shaken off of our life, then we should be afraid. So this is a right kind of fear, a fear of reverence and respect. That's why we revere and respect our parents, because we don't want to lose our relationship with them. In the same way, the exhortation in the scriptures is to relate to God with reverence and respect. So the fear is connected to the fear of losing our relationship with God. So as I said, scripture tells us to be fearful of the right things and not the wrong things. Another example is the scripture also tells us to be respectful and fearful of authorities, leaders in our society. Part of the way the society is ordered is for us to respect those who are given the authority to order our life as a society. So it's right for us to respect the leaders of our church, our bishops. And those are expressions of the right kind of fear for people who are supposed to rule over us, who are also supposed to take care of us. Scripture reminds us that we should not be afraid of losing material things, because in the end, they are passing away. Let me read this passage from the letter to the Hebrews. Keep your life free from love of money, and be content with what you have. For he said, I will never fail you or forsake you. Hence, we can confidently say, the Lord is my helper, I will not be afraid. What can man do to me? Money you could lose, because in the end, God will always be there and will provide you with what you need. Maybe not what you want, but definitely what you need. A scripture tells us not to be afraid of the wrong things and just be afraid of the right things, like our relationship with God, not losing our relationship with God. One of the things that scripture reminds us of, which is sometimes very difficult to accept, is this: we should not be afraid of death. Philippians 1 verse 21 says this, for to me to live is Christ, and to die is gain. Here, St. Paul gives this classic description of the way he approached life. He said, well, in the end, if I live for Christ. And if I die, I would end up gaining Christ. So he was expressing a certain confidence that in the end, he was willing to face death, because death was just a transition into gaining Christ. So he said, why be afraid? If I have Christ while I'm alive, that's good. And if I die, I should not be afraid, because in death, I will also gain Christ. After we've gained some insight from scriptures about the different things that we should not be afraid of, let's go to something practical. Often, our fear is deeply rooted in the way we experience others socially. And one of the things that we need to overcome is our social fears, especially in serving the Lord. Often, we find ourselves in situations where we're asked to do things, and the first reaction we have is, I don't know what people would say. I might make a mistake. People might laugh at me. The invitation to face this kind of experience is to face it with a confidence that does not disregard the experience of fear of making mistakes or fear of being in front of people, but we must have the ability to do what we're supposed to do, serve in the way we're supposed to serve, in spite of those hesitations and fears. And often, we're asked to just go out there and do it confidently. I remember when I was new in the community, I was asked to share my life to a big crowd. And I was so concerned about what others would say, or if I would make a mistake, and things that I would say. But then one brother just explained it to me so simply. He said, Raul, definitely you'll be afraid. When you're in front of that big crowd, you will feel nervous. But concentrate on speaking about God, and concentrate on the people that you're talking to. Do not bother about what they would say. Just concentrate on what you want to share. Go and serve confidently. And I remember when I faced that crowd, I was afraid, I was nervous, but I just went out and did what I was supposed to do. often we need to face those social fears. And all we need often is a reminder that it's not about us, but it's about the people we're supposed to serve. Let's continue talking about something practical. Aside from facing social fears, sometimes we find ourselves facing real danger. Now, when we do experience facing real danger, we need to recognize that amidst the concern for our lives and the lives of others, we have the capacity to make a choice to do what's right amidst the experience of fear. I remember one time we were walking we were hiking in this trail, and a bunch of young people that I was leading found themselves in a place that was not supposed to be our path, but we found ourselves lost, and this group of students found themselves trespassing. And as I walked to where they were, I noticed that there was a man shouting at them and telling them, "You should not be here, you're trespassing. Don't you know that people who trespass get killed?" And when I heard the people who trespass would get killed, I was suddenly afraid. For a few seconds, I was tempted to just leave them behind. But then I knew my responsibility. I need to take action. Now, the fear did not disappear. I was afraid, but I knew I was supposed to do what was right, which was to try to defend this group of students. And I went, faced this man who was shouting, and to the best of my ability, in spite of my fear, with my voice probably shaking, I told him, "Sir, it was a big mistake for us to be here. We're really sorry. We did not mean to trespass. Can you just help us find our way?" I don't know what happened, but the man probably felt my fear, felt my voice shaking, and yet he knew that I was trying to just protect this group of students. And eventually, he calmly looked at us and said, "Okay, I understand. You can go. You are not trespassing." Fear is something that we experience in the midst of danger. But it's not supposed to dictate to us what we would do. We can do what's right amidst the experience of fear. The basic Christian approach to fear is hope. That in the end, as we try to pursue what's right, our hope does not fail, because in the end, good will prevail. That's a Christian understanding of how we face our fears. How do we handle the problems of fear? Let me go through a few insights of how we should face our fears based on some of the insights from the scriptures. The main antidote to fear is faith, belief. Belief especially in the goodness of God. Let's look at the Bible. In Luke chapter 12, 22 to 32, Jesus gives an instruction on how we face the anxieties of life. He said to his disciples, "Therefore I tell you, do not be anxious about your life, what you shall eat, nor about your body, what you shall put on. For life is more than food, and the body more than clothing. Consider the ravens, they neither sow nor reap, they have neither storehouse nor barn, and yet God feeds them. Oh, how much more value are you than birds? And which of you, by being anxious, can add a cubit to his span of life? If then you are not able to do a small thing as that, why are you anxious about the rest? Consider the lilies of the field, how they grow. They neither toil nor spin, yet I tell you, even Solomon in all his glory was not arrayed like one of these. But if God so clothes the grass which is alive in the field today, and tomorrow is thrown into the oven, how much more will he clothe you, O men of little faith? And do not seek what you are to eat and what you are to drink, nor be anxious of mind. For all the nations of the world seek these things, and your Father knows that you need them. Instead, seek his kingdom and not these things, and this shall be yours as well. Fear not, little flock, for it is your Father's good pleasure to give you the kingdom. Jesus gives a wonderful insight about life, especially about anxieties. Aren't you anxious about your life, whether you would live tomorrow or die tomorrow or what you would eat? But the basic question that Jesus gives us is, will anxiety add to your life? Of course, the obvious answer is no. And what does he invite us to do? He tells us, have faith. God knows what you need. Won't he provide that to you? Isn't it the case that the nature around us, you see God providing for the birds, the flowers, and yet we are more important than those things? And Jesus reminds us, do not be afraid. God will be there for us. So the antidote that Jesus invites us to take in to face fear is faith. But we also can keep in our minds that we can face our fears. We need to acknowledge our irrational reactions or fears that we often experience that makes us hesitant to do what we're supposed to do. We need to be careful and be aware of those irrational fears. Like sometimes, I get too concerned about my health. Then I ask myself, what sickness will I have? Will I have the cancer of my father or the Parkinson's of my mother? But then I say to myself, what will that anxiety or that worrying do? Should I not just make sure that I live a healthy life? So I need to be careful, because sometimes those fears and those irrational thoughts come into our heads. And it could prevent us from experiencing peace. Some of those irrational fears don't normally just go away. Sometimes we have to just keep on thinking positively, doing what we're supposed to do, and fighting those anxieties. We should not expect them to go away quickly. We need to be patient with them. Some of these fears about our life, about our health, may never go away. There might be just part of the thing that we need to face in a day-to-day way. But the invitation of the Lord is to not let those fears overcome us. The invitation of the Lord is to fight, to keep on keeping on, to choosing again and again to trust in the Lord. The fears and the experience of fear will always be there. But we have a choice, and we have the ability to choose the right response. And often the right response is to have faith in the Lord and to persevere in the choice of doing the good and persevering in our life as disciples. In the end, we often would say to ourselves, can we really face our fears? Can we really have that faith that we need to overcome the challenges of life? The good news is this: we are followers of Christ, and our confidence lie in this truth. Jesus Christ was able to face the cross. He offered his life on the cross. And in offering his life on the cross, he did not only face his fear, he became victorious over death. And I think as Christians, part of the message that we need to bear is we can make a choice to face fear with faith.